Number 10. Inappropriate pictures. Funerals are already depressing, and nobody wants to believe that some people really just have no respect for the dead. A couple from South Florida is having a bit of an issue with an employee at a funeral home after the employee took some inappropriate pictures of their dead daughter and then posted them on social media. I guess bit of an issue in this case is an understatement. You have to be seriously twisted to do something like this. And as you can imagine, taking pictures of the dead and posting them online is not part of the funeral home job description. The devastated parents of the deceased girl actually filed a lawsuit against the Stevens Brothers Funeral Home for the poor behavior, and rightfully so. According to the lawsuit, the parents of the girl hired the home to provide them with funeral services, but then someone who works there took a picture of the girl's cold, dead body and sent the picture to some of their friends, who ended up posting them online. Seriously, that is just beyond messed up. We don't know exactly how inappropriate these pictures were, as that information is not being released, thankfully. But it's safe to say that they must have been pretty bad, because the lawsuit is seeking damages in the form of $15,000. And according to what the owner of the funeral home told news outlets, the staff member, if proved to have done something malicious, will most definitely be fired. Number 9. Falling out of the coffin. A shocking moment was caught on camera somewhere in what appears to be Africa. During the funeral procession, the pallbearers were walking down the street holding a coffin containing a dead body on their shoulders. There were 4 people walking with the coffin when the bottom of it suddenly gave out and the corpse flopped onto the road. Even more shocking is the fact that the pallbearers didn't even realize the body had fallen out. How they didn't realize the load suddenly became a lot lighter is really anyone's guess. They kept on walking while the body, which was wrapped up in cloth like a mummy, lay limp on the concrete. It was such a shock to the people watching that you can hear screams and cries for help in the video. It's not clear what made the bottom of the coffin fall out, though it was probably just a faulty box. It didn't really look that sturdy. After quite a bit of yelling, the pallbearers ran back to where the body was laying in the street and proceeded to cover it up. Unfortunately, the video stopped at this point, so we don't know what happened afterwards. They either had to go and get a brand new coffin, or carry the body in the coffin like carrying a paper bag full of groceries that has a hole in the bottom. Number 8. Body mix-up. After a horrifying body mix-up in the Bronx, a family ended up mourning the wrong dead body at their funeral service. That's something you think could only happen at a twisted comedy movie, but it actually happened in real life. Valjean McDonald was 81 years old when sadly she passed away from cancer just several days before Christmas. The funeral service was held and the family arrived to say their goodbyes. Some family members even flew in all the way from Australia. But according to ABC7 Chicago, nobody noticed the mix-up because they were all too busy grieving. The excuse that came after was that everybody's eyes were full of tears, so they didn't notice that the woman in the casket was not Val McDonald. Sure, she was wearing the woman's clothes and jewelry, and yes, they did share a bit of a likeness, but they were definitely not the same person. It was actually the children who figured out it wasn't their grandmother in the coffin. It was a 10-year-old boy, one of Val's grandsons, who brought it to everyone's attention, telling them, "That doesn't look like my grandma." You're correct, and that's because it's not your grandma. Even after the boy figured it out, the adults were still in complete denial. After all, grieving the loss of a matriarch of a family only to realize it's the wrong woman is more than a little embarrassing. They said it didn't look like grandma because cancer had changed her appearance, but it turned out that the kids were right. The funeral home called the family 5 days later and told them that they'd made a mistake and accidentally put a different woman in her coffin. They ended up getting a free funeral out of the deal, and that particular business is now under investigation. Number 7. Drive-up funeral. In 2020, the coronavirus changed how a lot of daily businesses had to operate, including funeral homes. When Wanda DeSalle passed away from complications because of her contracting the coronavirus after catching the virus from attending a funeral earlier, everyone felt a lot safer if instead of attending the funeral physically, they did a bit of a drive-by. Weird, but hey, that's how the world has changed thanks to COVID-19. And so the 76-year-old nurse was transported in a hearse to her gravesite, and everyone who wanted to pay their respects drove by in their cars and did so out of their windows as if they were ordering a cheeseburger. All you could hear this day at the graveyard was the rumble of engines and the muffled cries coming from behind tinted glass. So how do you feel about a drive-through funeral service? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Death at a funeral. The last place anyone expects a violent shooting to take place is at a funeral, yet a tragedy just like that recently did take place. A grieving mother in the state of Florida who was attending the funeral for her teenage son was shot and almost killed. As absurd as it sounds, this really did happen. According to USA Today, the dead teenager was only 18 years old when he was killed back in November by a Brevard County deputy in the city of Cocoa. Just as the pastor was finishing his prayers, a gunshot went off. It was a single shot, and no one knew where it came from. In the brief moment of silence that followed the shot, there was suddenly a scream from the victim's mother. She cried out, "I'm hit!" And most of the people in attendance panicked and screamed as they ran for their lives. But here's where things get really horrifying. The police investigation revealed that the shot was probably an accidental discharge. A 16-year-old boy who decided to bring a gun to the funeral service accidentally popped off the shot and almost killed his dead friend's mom. The bullet went through the kid's leg and hit her, though luckily she did survive. Still not the greatest thing to happen at your own son's funeral. We're sure this kid felt even more terrible than he already did after losing his pal, and he probably won't be bringing guns to any more funerals. But how did a young kid like that even get a gun, and why on earth did he bring it to a funeral in the first place? We have so many questions about this one. Number 5. Shocking disrespect. The biggest funeral firm in Britain has been accused of treating dead bodies with an appalling amount of disrespect. A recent investigation has revealed that the funeral firm was stacking up bodies like packages in a warehouse or old television sets in an industrial storage facility. Instead of keeping the dead bodies in a chapel before burial or cremation, the dead were stuck in a warehouse and piled up as if this was some sort of gross zombie film. But this atrocity is made even worse by the fact that grieving families thought their dead loved ones were being stored securely and respectfully in funeral homes. In one incident, the funeral home stuffed 4 bodies into the same van, and the lid had to be taken off an old woman's coffin so that they could all fit piled on top of one another. That's sad and disgusting. And here's where you'll get really angry. The company is called Co-op Funeral Care, and they made a whopping $52 million last year alone, according to the Daily Mail. And it's all thanks to the fact that they treat dead people like stock in an Amazon warehouse. People like this should probably be given the exact same respect they gave when it's their time to go, don't you think? And what do you think the consequences should be for a company like this? Number 4. Funeral crash. A funeral procession has led to a devastating highway traffic accident in Florida. The funeral procession had been heading down Highway 29 going north. A woman behind the procession driving a 2005 Chevrolet Impala was forced to stop in the middle of the highway to avoid crashing through the funeral cars because they were going so slowly. The guy coming up behind her didn't see her stop and rear-ended her so fast and so hard that her SUV flipped over. The guy who crashed into the Impala had to be sent to the hospital and was in serious condition, with wounds that could turn out to be fatal. The woman he hit only sustained minor injuries, though. In the end, this wasn't really a disaster at a funeral, it was more like a disaster caused by a funeral. The procession at the time was going up a hill. They were going no more than 30 miles an hour in a 70-mile-per-hour zone. And the lack of visibility caused total mayhem. Back roads are the way to go, especially with such precious cargo. Number 3. Funeral director arrested. This next one is pretty disturbing. Funeral director Joseph Bonner was arrested after he got busted abusing corpses at the Heritage Memorial Garden Cemetery in Pritchard. Luckily, he wasn't abusing the corpses in the way you might have thought. Instead, he got in trouble for not properly burying people. The police began investigating after multiple families filed complaints about a horrible odor coming from the graves at the cemetery. Not only that, but there were allegations thrown at the funeral director about him digging up bodies and using them for unknown purposes, and even digging up caskets and reusing them so he didn't have to buy new ones. He also broke rules by not actually embalming the bodies and sometimes not even burying them where they were supposed to be buried. In the end, the police had to excavate a series of graves to bring this guy up on charges. They were getting about 60 to 70 complaints a year about Joseph, which, let's be honest, is about 60 or 70 more than they should get about any funeral director. They found that the bodies had been poorly buried, with the caskets not sealed, and with some of them under only 8 inches of dirt instead of 2 feet. Number 2. Risen corpse. At a funeral in India, a man who had been declared legally dead by his doctors suddenly woke up just moments before his body was to be put in the ground. His family was attending the funeral ceremony when they witnessed his body begin to move. Everyone freaked out. The funeral was halted, and he was taken back to the hospital. Doctors then declared that he was still alive, Nobody knows what happened, but it looks like this guy rose from the dead. The doctors had put him on a ventilator support, and last we heard, he was still breathing. What's really scary is why he was declared dead in the first place. He was at a private hospital and his family ran out of money to pay for his treatment. And that's when the doctors declared him dead. But of course, they claim no wrongdoing on their part. Number 1. Animal Crossing funeral. We already talked about one bizarre coronavirus funeral, but now we're gonna talk about another. A gamer who died of the coronavirus had himself the safest funeral imaginable. His death was celebrated on the Nintendo game Animal Crossing. Brandon Perez died at the age of 23, and his friends and family gave him a funeral service in the virtual world of Animal Crossing, apparently because he really loved that game. His family actually used his Nintendo to go into the virtual town that Brandon had built for himself. Then his friends and family watched while his avatar was laid out on a bed in the middle of some trees, and they all said their final respects. His cousin Priscilla Perez from Long Island said Brandon absolutely loved video games, so this type of service was perfect for him. It was the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. We were able to go into the town that my cousin had built on Animal Crossing and leave flowers, Priscilla added. We have a really big family, and it made us happy to have that for Brandon. It's a place that we can go back to and be with him. It was a fitting end for a life lost way too early.
Number 10. Serving himself to guests. A man in Japan cooked his own private parts and then served them to guests at a dinner party. In this bizarre case of cannibalism, nobody was innocent. The man, Mao Sugiyama, was just 22 years old when he volunteered to undergo surgery to have his private parts surgically removed. These pieces were then frozen and then sent home with him from the hospital. Once he got home, he organized the most disturbing dinner party that you've ever heard of. 5 paying guests attended, who apparently paid around $200 per person to be served his removed organs. This happened in Tokyo, with his body parts being garnished with mushrooms and parsley. But things were even weirder than that at the dinner party. Before anyone could eat, they had to sit down and listen to a creepy piano recital. They then had to take part in a panel discussion about what they were doing. In fact, Mao had actually planned to eat himself, but had changed his mind at the last minute and decided to serve them up. Mao did the cooking himself at the party. There were about 70 people in attendance, with the rest of the members eating a meal of either beef or crocodile. As if having 5 people eat surgically removed pieces of himself wasn't enough, he had to have 65 witnesses munching on dead crocodiles. One of the diners who had volunteered to eat Mao Sugiyama was quoted as saying, "It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance." Apparently, this exclusivity made him decide in the spur of the moment to just go ahead and do it. As for the taste, guests said the food was a little rubbery and didn't really taste like much. Number 9. Exploding whipped cream. A popular lifestyle blogger had died after a terrifying whipped cream accident. As hard as it is to believe, this poor woman really died from a simple whipped cream dispenser, which actually exploded and hit her so hard that it killed her. Her name was Rebecca Berger, and she had a huge following on Instagram. The French national blogged about fashion, food, fitness, and all things healthy. After her death, her relatives actually posted a photograph on Instagram of the very whipped cream dispenser that took her life. According to the report in Time magazine, the dispenser had been recalled 4 years prior in early 2013 because there were concerns about its plastic top exploding off. And this is exactly what happened to poor Rebecca. The whipped cream dispenser exploded and hit her in the thorax, causing her to die. Last we heard, prosecutors in France were investigating the incident to determine whether the canister was indeed to blame for the 33-year-old's early death. At the time of her passing, she had 170,000 followers. One of her most recent posts was her expressing how grateful she was for her beautiful life and all her success, and how she was looking forward to the future. Unfortunately for Rebecca, a whipped cream canister stopped that future from ever coming. Number 8. Chef falls in his soup. You may have heard the rumors about a chef who died after falling in his very own vat of chicken soup. Well, the rumors are entirely true. The chef was working for a wedding in Iraq, boiling a giant pot of chicken soup for the guests. The cooking took a horrible turn for the worst after he somehow tripped, fell into the boiling soup, and died from severe burns. This is one of the only recorded cases in history where a chef accidentally cooked himself to death, literally. The dead chef was named Isa Ismail, only 25 years old. He was working at one of the biggest wedding venues anywhere in Iraq, called Hazel Hall. Because the wedding was going to host hundreds of people, he needed to brew up a giant pot of chicken soup. It's not really that uncommon. What was uncommon was when he slipped and fell into it, suffering terrible third-degree burns to 70% of his body. He was quickly dragged out of the boiling soup, but it was already too late. He was sent to the nearest hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries 5 days later. Sadly, Ismail left behind his career, his 2 daughters, and his 6-month-old son. And to make things even more embarrassing for the man, he had been a professional chef for 8 years. According to what a relative told local news, he frequently cooked for wedding parties, funerals, and other various ceremonies. Number 7. Cooking show collapse. A Thai internet celebrity recently dropped dead while live streaming a cooking class. The fans who were watching couldn't believe their eyes. They were positively shocked. The internet celebrity, named Pai Peng, started her stream pretty normally and was cooking up something delicious in the kitchen. But then, with seemingly no warning, her eyes rolled in the back of her head and she collapsed. Fans were screaming. The woman was lying on the floor. It was not a very good cooking show. Peng's husband rushed into the frame just a few seconds later and turned off the live stream. Fans then had to wait a few days until Peng's sister went onto her account and revealed the tragic news that she had died. Apparently, an autopsy done at the hospital showed that she passed from a sudden heart failure. It was strange because she hadn't been diagnosed with any diseases during her lifetime and seemed perfectly healthy. Her heart just suddenly quit in the middle of the cooking show, and that was it. Her life was over. Number 6. Fugu poisoning. A man was left in critical condition in Hong Kong after being poisoned by a pufferfish. But no, he wasn't swimming in the ocean. Instead, he had gone home from a fishing trip and cooked up some fugu for himself, with fugu being the meat from the pufferfish. The 65-year-old man's meal didn't go quite as planned though. He quickly developed facial numbness, extreme weakness. He fell into respiratory failure, and he had to be quickly whisked to the emergency department at the local hospital. Hospital officials were sure he had gotten tetrodotoxin poisoning from the pufferfish. Normally, if a person decides to eat the deadly meat from a pufferfish, they go to a proper restaurant with trained chefs who can prepare it the right way. The guy caught the pufferfish himself and took it home to eat it for lunch. As you probably know already, pufferfish have an extremely deadly tetrodotoxin in their liver, skin, and eggs. To cook this fish without properly removing the organs so that the toxins don't kill you is very difficult, and while the individual managed to survive the poisoning, he was extremely lucky. Most people would have died. Would you ever dare to try fugu? Let us know how brave you are in the comments. And before we keep going, don't forget to subscribe. Number 5. Cooking the wife. A chef killed his wife and then, over the course of 4 days, cooked her. Oh yes, this is one of the most bizarre murder plots that you've probably never heard of. The chef, David Vanes, worked at the Time Contemporary Cafe in Lomita, California. On October 18, 2009, David walked through his front door, got in an argument with his wife, and then he killed her. According to what he told investigators, David was so angry with his wife that he duct taped her mouth shut and then bound her hands and feet so that she couldn't move. That next morning, David found her dead on the ground, and his actions were obviously what killed her. So, what does he do? He puts his wife's body in a 55-gallon drum of boiling water and then cooked her for 4 days. As a chef, this was his go-to method. He slow-cooked his own wife until she was soft and squishy enough that he could mix her in with waste from the restaurant. Then he poured the waste into the grease pit. Whatever remains couldn't go into the grease pit. He put it in the dumpster. This guy was clearly quite sick. Even after all that trouble, he kept his wife's polished skull. Amazingly, David got away with the murder until 2011. That was when the police realized he probably was the one that killed his wife. Knowing that the cops were onto him, David jumped off an 80-foot cliff in Rancho Palos Verdes. But much to his dismay, the fall didn't kill him. Now he's in a wheelchair and guilty of murder. Number 4. Burned by the stove. In Pennsylvania, a woman had died trying to cook herself a meal. It happened in the small city of Easton, with the woman being burned so badly in a cooking fire that her injuries caused her to die. But the way she got the burns in the first place is a little horrific. According to the Lehigh County Coroner's Office, Griselda Torres Soto, 57 years old, suffered third-degree burns when her clothes caught aflame as she was cooking. We don't know exactly what she was cooking or how her clothes caught on fire, as the police haven't released that information, but anyone with an imagination can see how this went down. Her sleeve likely caught on fire. The flames then creeped up her arms, and within just a few seconds, Griselda was a flaming scarecrow, screaming and running in circles around her kitchen. The fire must have spread to her whole body, since her burns were so bad that she died shortly after being admitted to the hospital. If the fire had only spread to her arms, it's unlikely she would have passed away, She must have been a literal human torch before somebody found her and managed to put out the flames. Number 3. Drive-by cooking fatality. In one of the most heartbreaking accidents ever, a woman was killed in a drive-by shooting as she stood in her kitchen and cooked dinner. We've heard a lot today about people accidentally burning themselves, but this takes cooking gone wrong to a whole new level. The poor woman, identified by the police as Sylvia Cordova, 56 years old, hadn't done anything to anyone. She was literally standing in her kitchen and cooking dinner when somebody drove by her house in Hartford and shot bullets through her walls. When the police arrived to the scene just after 5 o'clock in the evening, they discovered extensive gunfire damage to the woman's home. They also found rifle casings in the area and Sylvia lying dead on her kitchen floor. Lieutenant Aaron Boisford called the terrifying crime brazen and upsetting, especially since Sylvia had been home alone at the time of the incident. She was cooking a lonely meal for herself, probably deep in thought, when from out of nowhere, well, a bullet went ripping through the wall and knocked her down. She then had to lay there all alone as she died. Number 2. Leg tacos. When an unidentified man got into a horrible motorcycle accident, doctors were forced to amputate his leg. His foot was shattered, and he would never be able to walk on it again. But when doctors told him what they would have to do, the man simply asked if he could keep his leg after they chopped it off. Naturally, the leg did belong to him, so they let him keep it. What happened next is gonna make you sick. 3 weeks after the accident, the individual invited 10 of his closest friends to a special brunch. Apple strudel was served, puff pastries, chocolate cake, and even some fruit tarts. The guests drank gin lemonade and mimosas. And for the main course, tacos made out of the guy's amputated leg. Now, you might be wondering how he got away with this. The truth is that the United States does not have a federal law exclusively banning cannibalism. Only in Idaho can you be arrested for eating human flesh. You obviously can't murder people or sell human meat, but there's no law saying you can't eat your own flesh for whatever reason. But now, what about the motive? The guy had actually wanted to freeze-dry his leg and use it as a doorstop. However, his main reason behind eating his leg might not actually sound that crazy. He claimed that the leg belonged to him. It was a part of him, and he wanted it back. And number 1, exploding soup. A waitress in China got a little more than she bargained for when she showed up to work and had soup explode in her face. The waitress was attending a table full of guests when one of the guests passed a lighter to his friend sitting across from him. However, he accidentally dropped it into the hot pot of soup. As the waitress tried to fish the lighter out of the soup using a ladle, it exploded, causing boiling hot liquid to splash into the poor woman's face. But not just her. One of the guests was also impacted by the exploding soup, and while it may sound kind of hilarious, it was horrifying for those involved. Both the customer and the waitress were sent to the hospital with serious burns. Unfortunately for both of them, the burns were all on their faces. Even though they were expected to make a full recovery, neither of them will ever look the same again. The waitress and the guests will now have gruesome burns on their faces, and it was all because of some exploding soup. Number 12. Eyeball tattoo. Tattoos are an amazing way of showing off your unique personality, and 24-year-old Amber Luke from Australia definitely believed that. Luke has spent over $26,000 on tattoos, piercings, and other body modifications. She never imagined that one tattoo decision could disable her. What happened? Well, she went blind. Luke, who calls herself Blue Eyes White Dragon, sweet name Luke, went in to get an eyeball tattoo. Yes, you can actually get tattoos on your eyeballs. The session proved to be a torturous ordeal. She has over 200 tattoos all over her body, but says the eyeball tattoo was the most painful of them all. In the procedure, blue ink had been injected all over the whites of her eyes. She was no stranger to the pain, but things took a dangerous turn when the tattoo artist went too deep into her sclera. The syringe was inserted 4 times in each eye. We can't handle an eyelash making its way into our eyes. Imagine what a syringe could feel like. She described the pain as feeling as if the tattoo artist had rubbed 10 shards of glass directly into her eye. If done properly, the procedure shouldn't cause any issues with one's sight, but Luke was left blinded for 3 weeks. Since then, Luke has given up on the idea of getting any more extreme body modifications done. However, she does plan to be covered in tattoos by the time she's 25. That's some determination. Number 11. Flee the scene. When you decide to get the tattoo, it's not just the design that matters. What shop you go to get it done matters a lot too. Shops that have been around for a long time and have satisfied customers to vouch for their artist's work is probably where you want to go. But one guy chose to dive headfirst into a pool of mistakes. He chose to get his first tattoo done at a shop that had only been open for a few months. His tattoo artist was talented and did the job well, but despite that, he had an extra line coming from the center of the piece. Can you guess why? When the artist was tattooing him, a flea jumped out from his dreadlocks and straight onto the stencil. Probably the flea wanted to contribute to the art. Number 10. Eye of the Tiger. Even a tiny mistake feels like a lot when it comes to tattoos, because it's going to stay on your skin forever. So you can imagine what this man might be feeling with a full back tattoo of a deformed-looking tiger. He went into a shop with the idea to get a Japanese-style tiger on his back. The tattoo artist told him it could be done. Everyone who saw the tattoo deemed that was a lie. We don't know about a tiger, but the final result came out looking like a cat that was run over, with mismatched eyes and botched proportions. We wouldn't be surprised if a third grader claimed credit for the artwork. The only saving grace for the tattoo is that it's going to be a great conversation starter. Number 9. Galaxy. The star-studded sky and the pristine colors of the galaxy. Who doesn't love a good celestial-themed tattoo? This might look amazing, but the hard work that goes behind the seamless blend is colossal, to say the least. This is why you should always look at your tattoo artist's previous work before finalizing them. Could you imagine going in with a beautiful reference picture and enduring pain for hours, only to look in the mirror and see the exact opposite of what you wanted? A woman went to a tattoo artist and said she wanted the galaxy tatted on her chest. Can you picture a beautiful cosmic scene? Well, so did she, but that's not what she got. Definitely not. It looks like the tattoo artist was going for gummy worms instead of a galaxy. The streaky shapes and the harsh lines looked beyond repair. And with the size and placement of the tattoo, we feel sorry for the lady who had to sit through the session only to get a splattered mess instead. Number 8. Forbidden Fruit. For a change, it's not the tattoo artist's fault. It just looks like poor life choices. Is it a private joke or something? We'll never know why this person chose to get a tattoo of a Tide Pod along with the words forbidden fruit. And they are not the only one, unfortunately, with Tide Pods etched on their body forever. Like the Tide Pod Challenge, getting tattoos of Tide Pods also became a trend, complete with the words forbidden fruit. On a lighter note though, it is surely a relief that the Tide Pod Challenge is finally over and people are using the pods for doing laundry again, the job it was meant for. Number 7. Proofreading is a must. It doesn't matter if you like tattoos or hate them. You have to agree that proofreading is extremely important, especially when you are writing something permanently on your skin. But some people just don't think things through. What do you get when you combine an epic mistake with a motivational quote, regret, with a tattoo that says, "Never don't give up"? We wonder what this person was really trying to say. Either they need a lesson in grammar, or they're just tired of the word and want to give up. Either way, it does make for a funny tattoo. Don't you agree? Okay, what's the weirdest place on your body that you would like to get inked? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 6. Blah blah blah. Aliens, UFOs, and other spooky sci-fi elements can make some really interesting tattoos, but it all depends on what message you want to convey. When Jeremy asked his friend to create a tattoo design for him, he didn't expect that the resulting abomination was going to haunt him for life. The tattoo is a UFO with a tractor beam coming out of it. It might not look that bad from afar, but unfortunately, as you get closer, the details get a little clearer. On the tractor beam are the words blah 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 blah. And then what's more, in the tractor beam, there's a cow. What is that even supposed to mean? Aliens are abducting cows? And tractors? Jeremy said that it hurts so badly that he didn't even finish the tattoo. He initially wanted something meaningful to be written in the tractor beam, but told his friend to put whatever blah blah blah. And that's what he did. 20-year-old Jeremy thought it was a cool idea. Looking back now, the fact that the meaningless, unfinished tattoo that doesn't even look cool irks him. It might look like a drunk tattoo, but the fact that he was completely sober makes us question it even more. Number 5. Too inspired. It is quite common for people to use pictures of other tattoos as references. It can be a helpful idea because you'll know what the design looks like on skin. Plus, it might help the tattoo artist understand the positioning of the design better too. But references are references. They shouldn't be taken too literally. One tattoo fanatic picked out a near-perfection reference tattoo with crisp use of colors and seamless blending. The amazing execution of the fine lines and shading elevated the design, but the key to getting the same artwork is to choose your artist wisely. The reference tattoo was done on one side of the chest and extended to the shoulders and featured Batman's enemies. The inspired one was to be done on the arm. We are guessing that the tattoo artist didn't make any modifications to the original one because he added something he shouldn't have. While inking the villains on his client's arm, he also accidentally added the first guy's nipple too. What can be worse than having someone else's nipple inked on your arm forever? If you think this is bad, then stay tuned for the celebrity tattoo we have at number 1. Number 4. No bounties. Getting a tattoo is an important life lesson, and deciding to get one while you're drunk sounds like the perfect evening activity, doesn't it? This is only if you like regrets that follow. 31-year-old Danielle was out drinking with a friend when both of them decided it was time to break the monotony of their lives and spice the evening up by getting tattoos. They were sitting at the bar laughing and thinking about what they should get when Danielle said, "It's like we don't have any boundaries." And that's the moment she decided what she was going to get. The words, "no boundaries." Not so bad, right? The two found a tattoo shop, but unfortunately, the tattoo artist was also, no points for guessing, drunk. She told him she wanted a tattoo from the side of her breast to her hip with some stars on it too. The next morning she woke up and realized what she had done. Danielle texted her friend to tell her that she got an embarrassing tattoo that says, "no boundaries," and sent a picture. Pop came the reply, "You know that doesn't say no boundaries, right?" The artist missed the letters A and R, so the tattoo read, "no boundies." We can only hope the mistake can be redeemed in a cover-up, or by adding the missing letters. Number 3. Chinese tattoo. Getting a tattoo in another language can instantly give you an edge, so getting words inked in different languages has become a very popular trend. Even common and basic words like hope and love look cool when done in a different language. In fact, it is so popular that many celebrities have gone with this time-tested tactic. For example, Justin Bieber has the word music tattooed on his forearm in Chinese. Justin Timberlake has the same tattoo as well. Angelina Jolie has the words determination tattooed on her arm in Urdu. The list goes on. So why shouldn't we common folks follow the trend? There's no harm, right? But it is important to understand that these are words and letters that you are tattooing on yourself, not designs. In the mindless days of foreign language tattoos, many people have fallen victim to getting meaningless bogus inked on their skin. One man was smitten by a Chinese encryption, which he assumed to be a fancy pattern. He went ahead to get this inked on his left arm. He probably was only thinking about how cool it was going to look, instead of checking what the words actually meant. Thanks to technology, we now know the bright red Chinese letters do not hold any ancient wisdom. They literally mean turkey sandwich. Well, the literal translation was actually meant to be Firebird sandwich, and that is exactly why you need to spend at least 10 minutes on your tattoo design before you finalize it. Number 2. Tattoo removal gone wrong. No, she did not make the list because of a bad tattoo. Instead, it was the tattoo removal gone wrong that scarred her for life, literally. 21-year-old Pasuda Riao had a large tattoo of 3 roses and leaves on her chest. She wanted to get it removed to look more professional at work. She would have never thought that the removal process would leave a bigger impact than the tattoo itself. She chose a chemical method where a mix of chemicals is applied to the skin. The laser-free method is applied that's supposed to bring the tattoo pigments out of the skin. It creates a scab that can be peeled off easily. Sounds a little too easy, doesn't it? Immediately after she began the treatment, her skin became itchy and started hurting a lot. 2 months after Rial got the procedure done, her skin had swollen up and caused, in her own words, torturous pain, not to mention the unsightly scar across her chest. It took a long time for the scab to come off. She described the whole process as torture. She couldn't even sleep because of the pain. After all that pain, was the removal worth it? Rial feels that the residual scar is worse than what she started off with, and she doesn't recommend the treatment at all. Do you know anyone that got a tattoo removed? What happened? Let us know in the comments below. And number 1, Japanese barbecue grill. Remember when we said how important it is to research the word you get tattooed if you're getting it done in a different language? Well, Ariana Grande fell down the same rabbit hole and made a hilarious blunder. After releasing her single 7 Rings, Ariana began 2019 with a tattoo of what she thought said 7 rings in Japanese. But it turns out the star made an ignorant mistake. The Japanese letters actually read Shichirin, which is a Japanese barbecue grill. That's something she definitely didn't want. The two letters separately mean 7 and ring, but when joined together, they have a completely different meaning, as pointed out by Ariana's Japanese fans. Soon after, she got it fixed, but now the tattoo reads Japanese barbecue finger. Another lesson in the book called Why You Should Choose Your Tattoos Wisely. Thanks for watching. Which tattoo do you think was the worst? Do you have any regrettable tattoos? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to hit subscribe for more. See you next time.